Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Super grateful to be invited to speak and also super grateful that you take the time out of your Wednesday to come to this session. I know I'm actually the last session of the day. I think there's been some really great sessions so far. Very difficult to sit in front of a computer all day, even though we've all been doing it now for 3 months. So I will try and keep it light and hopefully engaging. As Natasha alluded towards, I'm normally based in Berlin, hence the background, but today I'm actually in Barcelona. And I wanted to maybe just quickly introduce myself and a little bit behind the resume or behind the LinkedIn. So yeah, my name's Kieran Dodd. I'm the global head of executive recruitment at Zalando. A little bit around my background, I've spent the last 10 years working in talent acquisition and recruitment. I spent the first 4 years working in agency. I actually was based in London and then based in Barcelona. And around 6 years ago, I joined an organization called Booking.com, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. It's an online marketplace for booking accommodation. And I actually joined the team, which was 13 to 14 people in tech and product recruitment at the time. And fast forward 4 years later, I think our highest point, we were 75 people in talent acquisition. And by the end of it, my job, I was leading all of product and tech, which was around 50 people across Seattle, Amsterdam, Tel Aviv, and Shanghai. And we actually went through what I would call hyperscaling recruitment. And I think we had to hire around about 1,000 people per year for kind of the last 2 years. And around 85% of that talent we had to relocate to the Netherlands just due to the shortage of talents in the Netherlands. And then after Booking, I decided to join an organization called OLX Group, which I think some of you will be familiar with and some maybe not. Basically, it's a classifieds business similar to eBay. It's owned by Naspers Group, which is one of the biggest companies in the world. And my role there was actually to take a decentralized TA function across the globe and centralize it and have one way of working. And then finally, I joined Zalando, where I am today. And my role is basically building the strategy for executive recruitment and playing a role within the TA leadership team for the overall success of the leadership team. I am Scottish, hence the Scottish flag, and I'm super happy. I went through the attendees list, and it seems it's quite a strong UK attendee list. So after living in Barcelona, Amsterdam, and Berlin, I'm very hopeful you can all understand my accent compared to some of the people that I've worked with in the past, and I've toned it down in the last kind of 6 to 7 years. So Zalando. What about Zalando? I think most people will know it, but maybe I can introduce it. So Zalando is essentially a fashion e-commerce business, and it's very similar to ASOS, but much larger in size. I think the UK market, there's maybe a bit more of an understanding of ASOS, but globally, Zalando is a much bigger organization from market cap and from personnel. And what is it Zalando does? So we essentially want to be the starting point for fashion. And historically, 8 years ago when we were founded, we started by selling flip-flops, and our founders, very humble beginnings, would take the orders and then go and post the flip-flops to the people. And then fast forward 8 years later, we're one of the biggest organizations in Europe. And I think we still argue internally, are we a fashion business? Are we a tech and product business? Are we a commercial business? But it's a super, super interesting story. And I think what we're trying to do over the next 2 years is move away from just being an online fashion retailer to really owning the full platform experience and become the starting point for fashion. What does the starting point for fashion actually mean? So I think everyone's familiar with Spotify and Netflix. I don't speak for everyone, but I think constantly people, if you think of music, it's Spotify. If you think of movies and series, it's Netflix. And you go there and you land there and they'll take you through a journey. And I think Spotify, even now moving into podcasts. And what we want Zalando to be and where we're heading towards is really being the starting point for fashion. That means that any item of clothing that you think of, any beauty product that you have, you shouldn't need to go anywhere else. You should come on to Zalando, order your goods, and it should be with you tomorrow. We'll know your size and fit and be able to take you through this real emotional journey as a customer of not just going and buying one specific item, but being able to buy multiple brands and connect you with different brands across the globe and really give you that full holistic experience as a customer. Zalando. I think Zalando at a glance, to give you an idea of the scale of it, is roughly around 6.5 billion euros revenue. So I think if you think about, we're only 11 years old and we're 15,000 employees. So I think that tells a little bit story of the recruitment aspect that happened to get you from 0 to 15,000 in just 11 years. We have around about 380 million visits per month, and we have about 500 different products available and 32 million active customers, and we're live in 17 countries and continue to grow that. In terms of a talent acquisition team at Zalando at a glance, so we're 140 people, give or take a few. That is massive, and I think we need a team that big, and we're separated across mainly 4 hubs: Dublin, Berlin, Helsinki, and Dortmund, but we also have some smaller teams that sit within our warehouses as well. We probably deal with roughly around 300,000 different applicants per year coming through looking for roles at Zalando. So it gives you an idea of the scale there. And we're doing just over 6,000 hires per year across 130 different nationalities. And I think that's one of the greatest things about working for an organization like Zalando, is that you bring in such different cultures and different ways of thinking. I mean, in a 2-mile square radius, I think there's probably 127 different nationalities in our offices. And then finally, like, what is our mission as a TA team? Our mission is really to enable Zalando to be the starting point for fashion through partnering and consulting of hiring talent of different backgrounds. And what I want to do today is kind of explain to you on my view on how do you move away from being a traditional service function. I think recruitment 10 years ago was part of HR and it's become much more mature. But I think we as TA leaders have an opportunity to really move forward and become actually a strategic and a shaping function, really, than just your traditional shaping function. So I think we've all had these conversations with stakeholders in the past and business people, and there's more that see the value in TA, and I think that's happening every so often, but still sometimes I think people view it very simplistic. So in a whole, what do I see sometimes leaders of business units see recruitment as? I think simple: post jobs, maybe if you're lucky you have a sourcing function and they'll find candidates for you. The next stage is interviewing and assessment, which they need to be involved in and quite often don't want to be involved in, but unfortunately that's what happens when you scale. Then hiring, we have to hire people, and then finally the pre-onboarding and then onboarding stage. And I think more and more you see TA playing a bigger role in onboarding versus your HR functions. And I think as an TA leader, what you need to do to be able to convince your business that that is not recruitment, it's much more than that. And how do you get a seat at the table and make them invest in recruitment? And I think what you need to do is basically think about what is the reality, like what does TA actually look like, and make them understand this. So first is the recruitment part that we just discussed. Second is talent segmentation. I mean, you don't just go after one specific talent, whether it's executives, whether it's internal talent, whether it's different regions or different skill sets, different areas that you want to focus on. But there's so much to talent acquisition purely from just a segmentation point of view. Strategy, that's a massive part. Every talent acquisition organization now needs to have a strategy. It's not just simple as plug and play recruitment and the candidates will apply. Process excellence, I think this is so important in terms of your TA structure. You really need to build a fundamental process that's consistent, but also adaptable to different areas that you're in. So I think the way you hire for customer service is different for the way that you hire for tech, but the principles of the way that you hire for an organization should be consistent. Otherwise, you end up having a very decentralized TA function. Metrics and analytics. I mean, data-driven recruitment's been around for a long time. It's a bit of a buzzword. I think I am very, very strong believer in it. I try not to use the buzzword too often, but it's something that you truly need to invest in. I think you just have to look at 6 years ago, we were hiring data scientists and there were a short of data scientists for tech and product teams. And now you're hiring data scientists for large recruitment organizations. And I think that gives you an idea of where we're moving towards. Workforce planning is so massive for TA organizations. And I think very often it ends up being done from the business and the HR and handed over. And we actually need to play a really big part in that. Governance, GDPR, I think we're one of the biggest parts of the business that's actually at the forefront of managing personal data. And as an organization and a TA organization, you need to control that, or you'll eventually have a negative impact on the overall business. Tools and technology. This is something that's moving more and more towards. I think a lot of the partners today have spoke around that. But as a TA function, you now need to think about, like, what tools can you get the best out of? How can you automate some of your processes? A lot of TA still tends to be quite manual, and there's always going to be a need for the human touch. But how do you efficiently change the tools and the technologies part of the business? I think the next part I would say is operations, so recruitment operations. I think as an organization, if you're really large and you need a central operations team, the smaller you are, you need to have someone that owns that. If you don't invest in ATSs, if you don't invest in CRM systems, if you don't invest in contracts and licenses, eventually it will catch up with you. So you should think about that regardless your size. The larger you are, the bigger the need for it. And then finally, employer branding. I mean, it's so important. Like, people now want to work for companies that they have a feeling towards a brand, they want to work there. And I think if you take all this, what you need to do is basically you need to translate your business strategy into your talent strategy. And if you do that, then you're able to do that with these parts of the business. You need to make the business truly understand all parts of talent acquisition. And if you're able to implement these, then the talent results will come, which ultimately means the business results will come. And I think the business is something that really needs to understand that. So what for me does reactive service function look like? And to be fair, this still happens in organizations that I work at. We haven't solved all of it, but I definitely think it's something that would be good to take away. So you play no role in long-term planning. You're given targets and you have to execute against them. That has been a reactive function. You're unable to steer, you're unable to advise, you're unable to course correct. The business doesn't know the reality of the market. You know the reality of the market. You need to hold the business accountable for changing targets. We need to hold the business accountable for changing targets. I think too often I'm in organizations where they plan quarterly and then suddenly it's 100% increase. We know that that's impossible, and we need to be able to build a function that's able to support against the growth of the business. But you can only do that if you hold the business accountable for changing targets. And I think if you transfer it into the business, very little will the business make such a drastic change to their specific targets than they would from a recruitment perspective. Facilitates decision-making versus being part of the decision-making. I think you really, really need to be part of the decision-making to be a strategic function. You need to know what your role is in decision-making. Facilitating is servicing. We as TA leaders and our team should really be part of, should we hire this person or should we not hire this person? Chases numbers versus creating data-informed strategies. It's often very easy to fall into just, here's the amount of numbers on average. If you need to do 25 hires per quarter and you have X recruiters and you know what your recruitment team is, but there's so much more data that you can use to translate into a strategy that can make your team more efficient. Does not understand the impact on the bottom line. We as leaders and our teams need to understand that what we do and where we spend our money has an impact on the bottom line of an organization. And then if we are able to do that, we can translate that money somewhere else. Proactive strategic function. So enable data-driven decision by investing in analytics and operations. Shared OKRs with the business. For anyone that's not aware, OKRs are objective key results. So they are normally 3 or 4 goals a business will set on a quarterly or a 6-month basis to make sure that they're moving in the correct direction. We need to make sure that talent is part of those OKRs and the business feels accountable for it. Hire for tomorrow. I think too often we always think about what do we need to fill today, and not the next day. I think about a year in advance. Challenge businesses when they create teams, and do we need that team in a year? Put people in front of the business that there isn't a job open for, but you know they will add value to the business. Be an integral part of workforce planning. One of the key things to being proactive is really being part of that planning and having a seat at the table and steering. Hire commercially savvy TA leaders. If you're managing TA leaders, I think you now need to think about, do TA leaders understand profit and loss statements to a certain degree? Do they understand how to use budget correctly? Do they understand data? What does the foundations for me then look like from perfect or pillar point. I think what I would say here, this seems large, and I think I've worked at fairly large organizations, but I do think you can downsize this to work for you, even if you're only a 5 TA team. I think number one, you need to have operational excellence, and you need to have a talent strategy. You need to be able to enable the business to grow by fueling best in class talent. So think about having standardized, centralized ways of working that you can pivot depending on the area or depending on the region that you're hiring. Invest in upskilling interviewers and hiring managers. Focus on selection and decision making. The second part, again, data and technology driven recruitment. Create data informed strategies and invest in the correct technology. Third pillar, employer brand. So important. I think first and foremost, you need to have an employee value proposition. Why does someone want to join your organization? And that is a massive thing now for TA organizations, is being able to put something together like that. Have real values and principles. Hold your HR team accountable. Hold your business team accountable. Recruitment marketing and brand strategy is super important. And then finally, customer experience. Why do I use customer and not candidate? I think number one, all candidates are customers to a certain degree, and also the business is a customer. At the end of the day, like, we're there to make sure that we give them a good service as well. So think about how you can listen to them and listen to your candidates and manage that by Net Promoter Score. Natasha, would you be able to share the poll very quickly that I discussed? I would be very curious to hear what some of the core metrics are that you as leaders care most about. Like, what is the one specific one right now that's driving your industry?
I've just launched it, so hopefully you can, yeah, hopefully it's popped up for everyone. I'll give it 20 seconds or so, and then I'll share the results.
If you're good to share the results now, Natasha.
Yeah. There you go. Hopefully you can see them.
Okay, very interesting. I think some super important ones, and I'm actually not super surprised, but very interesting. So what I would say is some of your most important ones: quality of hire and funnel metrics. So I think you need to hire the right people into the organization. You need to understand your conversion rates at each stage of the funnel to be able to make proper strategies. You need to know your channel management. What do I mean by that? Is your sources that people are coming from, so you can invest and be able to move around different ways of bringing talent and engaging talent into the process. Candidate and stakeholders NPS is super important. And finally, time to hire and cost per hire. What I think that looks in practice is, this is how I think you get a seat at the table. I think this is an idea of a dashboard that you can create. It seems fancy, but it's very simple. And I think if you can take something like this to your leaders, to the table, they'll be so impressed and be able to really see the value of recruitment. And very quickly you can make and course correct on any issues that you see, and it also helps you set up for success. So different tools that you can build into there, but these are some of the key ones that I would consider using. Finally, here around conversion rates, I think this is super granular, but the reason why I show it is I think it's so important for you to understand each stage of the funnel, so you can see where your issue is and where do you need to course correct. And even more so, I think, like, if I look at application to hire, that's a 1.3% successful application rate. So if you were to hire 1,300 people, you would need 100,000 applicants. And I'm not sure the business sees that. And that's how you get more investment to do that. I think for me, these are key takeaways, but learnings that I've learned along the way as a leader, and I think being humbled by some of my learnings is yeah, number one is really stop being a service function and start being a shaping function. And we are so lucky as a TA team, we do shape organizations, and we have that opportunity to do that. I think number two, you hear it all the time, very simple, is invest in candidate experience. A really example that I remember quite well, I believe his name's Graham Johnson, and I apologize if I say it wrong. He was a head of TA at Virgin Media. Maybe some of you know the story. I try and do it in small time and do it justice. Essentially, he had a complaint on Glassdoor from a candidate that was so excited about her interview. She went to the interview, the experience was very bad. She was told within 10 minutes her CV wasn't right and she wasn't interviewed. Ultimately, she decided to leave Virgin Media and then join Sky. It made the head of TA think, we need to look into this and how do we translate that into cost? In the end, what they realized is they had roughly around 125,000 applicants per year, 6% disconnected due to a bad experience. $50 or €50 was the roughly monthly fee, and then times that by 12 and 6% of 125,000, it worked out a 5.4 million USD loss in revenue due to a bad candidate experience. Now, if you could ask for 2% of that to invest in tools to give a better experience, then think about the difference that you could make. So really, really try and understand it and translate it into cost. Build data-informed strategies to lead the business. It's so important. Build a mission statement to revert back to. If you see what we had earlier in the slides at Zalando, we had a mission statement. And I think as an organization, it steers us when we think about things. And all organizations have mission statements. Why should a TA organization not have a mission statement? And then finally, I would say invest in yourself and invest in your people. I think as a leader, I've definitely started to think more about what can I do differently? What do I need to change? TA as an organization is changing, skills are changing. How do I keep up with that? But then how also do I invest in my people and how do I make sure that they are able to carry on in that way? So I think trainings in different ways than your traditional offer management, candidate management, it's more around analytics, operations, etc. I'm super grateful for the opportunity to speak to you.